How are the latest findings in nutrition and wellness reshaping our understanding of health and longevity? That's the question we've put up today. Today's topic impacts all of us: what we eat, how we fuel our bodies, and the myths and truths behind popular diets and health trends. With conflicting advice on everything from low diets to liquid cleanses, it can be hard to know what's truly healthy. But today, we're joined by someone who's made it his mission to cut through the noise. Dr. Jonny Bowden, his journey took him through a personal transformation from addiction to wellness. He's a leading voice in holistic nutrition with a PhD and a wealth of knowledge that challenges outdated ideas on health. He's also known as the nutrition mythbuster. He's co-authored best-selling books like 150 Healthiest Foods on Earth and The Great Cholesterol Myth. Welcome to another episode of Khan Klinics, powered by the health section of American Muslim Today. I'm your host, Dr. Amir Khan. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to explore the truth behind nutrition myths and find out what really works, when it works, and how it works. Dr. Bowden, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
So we're going to dip into the program and start off by a first question.
Okay.
And that's about popular diets like keto, veganism, and low carb. With so many people focusing on just one style of eating, do you think these approaches truly benefit long-term health?
That's a great question. Let me give you my overall picture about diet in general. Having been in the field now 33 years and having written a number of books, including one that actually examined 38 different diets that were popular at the time it came out. That was in 2004. We've revised it several times. It's in the fourth edition now. It's called Living Low Carb. And we've gotten it down to like 4 categories of diets because a lot of them are just variations of other ones. And this is what the conclusion I've come to studying and teaching and working with clients and doing workshops on diets and choices. There is no perfect diet for human beings.
Sure.
The search for the perfect diet has driven more people crazy than I can possibly count. And that's just the ones I've seen. So what we should first do is change our focus from looking for the perfect diet to looking for the perfect diet for you, the listener. And it is going to be different than for Dr. Amir or for me or for our neighbor or for your pregnant daughter or for your elderly grandfather. It is going to be different. We are biologically individuals. And that's been shown since the 1950s by Roger Williams when he created the term biochemical individuality to explain how different even normal, healthy people can be. Our enzymes are different. We don't process foods the same way. We have some genetic propensities to do well with one kind of thing and not so much with another. Even the detoxification of alcohol, something that people are probably very aware of just from their lives. Some people have one drink, they are gone. Other people can drink you under the table. Well, we have different amounts of lactose dehydrogenase in order to break down that alcohol. So we are very, very unique. I'd like to start with the idea that any diet, other than a completely idiotic, like an all processed food diet or an all orange food, any of the diets you mentioned and many others can work for certain people. And to add another bit of nuance to the argument, they may work at certain times in your life and maybe not be the best diet for the rest of your life. Sometimes a diet can be very corrective and it can serve a purpose for a particular time or a particular season. Pregnancy is probably the best example because everybody knows that and knows that people eat differently when they're pregnant. Well, that could be the same kind of thing for every one of us. And for example, you mentioned keto diets. Big fan of what they can do under the right circumstances with the right person. So many people will do a kind of a keto type diet 3 or 4 times a year, just like on the change of seasons. And it's very helpful and cleansing. Other people just don't do well on them. And I think if we got out of the headset that why am I doing well on this diet? It's so great for everybody else. Think of it as a pair of shoes. That pair of shoes might fit 10 people in the room perfectly. But if it doesn't fit you and it makes your toes get bunions, it's not the right shoe for you. And that's how we have to start looking at diet. So when we talk about those different types that you mentioned, I have one piece, I will save us a lot of time. I have one piece of nutrition advice. It is the best advice I ever got as a student. It is the best advice I ever gave as an expert, and I give it every time I'm asked. This is all you really need to know about diet. You ready?
Sure.
Eat real food. Done. That is more
Okay.
important than whether you're on keto, whether you're on vegan, whether you're on carnivore, whether you're on low fat, high carb. Doesn't matter. Start with that premise. And many people ask me, well, how do I know if it's real food? Well, if you're
Right.
not sure, it's probably not. Just err on the side of, I'm not sure if this is real food, throw it out. So, for example, kale chips are not real food. They're better than potato chips, but they're processed foods. Kale is
Right.
real food. A steak is real food. A fish is real food. And my rule of thumb that I've used for 30 years is eat from the 4 food groups. You know what they are? Things you could have hunted, fished, gathered off the ground, or plucked from a tree. If it's in one of those 4 groups, it's probably good for you. Now, the rest of it is not irrelevant, but it's less important than that one principle: eating real food all the time. Ultra
Perfect.
processed food is killing us. And in
Sure.
America, we get 70% of our calories from it. And I think in Britain, it's 60 or 70%. This is insane. So the more that we can eat the way our great grandmothers ate, you know, in the blue zones, I'm sure your listeners are familiar with the blue zones. These are the areas around the globe, folks, where they have the highest rates of healthy 100-year-olds. There
Sure.
are 5 such areas. When Dan Buettner, who wrote the original book, The Blue Zones, the explorer and writer for National Geographic, they took some American foods from the supermarket, processed foods, to the elders in these communities, the old women who did the cooking or the old men who did the... And you know what they said?
Right.
What is this? What is this? They didn't even recognize it as food.
Right.
That should tell you something.
Right. So that's
So
processed food
all the
for.
marketing, all these heart healthy cereals is, excuse my expression, BS. They're not heart healthy. Fruit
Sure.
Loops are not heart healthy. They buy those certifications from the American Heart Association. It's a big source of income to the American Heart Association. I think they're $3,000 each. All you have to do is show that the food is low fat, which is, if we get to nutrition myths, we can take that one apart. So those
Sure.
don't get fooled by Cocoa Krispies are not a health food. Cheerios are not a health food. Cornflakes are not a health food. I hope none of those are your sponsors.
So my follow-up question from this is, you're talking about we talk about patient-specific therapy. So you've mentioned person-specific diet, and it's going to vary. It may be different in the beginning, and it's going to vary, and it's going to be at later ages. It may be different. We also talk about eat real food, and you've clarified that. Thank you for that. Let me have a follow-up question. You've been an outspoken critic about low-fat diets. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll go on to the next bit. What's truly important to know when it comes to dietary fats? Which ones should you have, which ones you shouldn't, and why not a low-fat diet?
Those are all great questions. And my view on that has shifted just slightly, and I'll tell you how and why.
Sure.
Well, when low-fat diets first came into popularity, it was like the 80s, early 90s, and it was all based on complete misinformation. It was based on the idea that eating fat makes you fat. And it was based on the idea that the most important thing in a diet is the number of calories you consume, and fat has more calories per gram than protein or carbohydrates. Protein and carbohydrates have about 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9. And alcohol, by the way, has 7. That's another calorie producing thing that we take in.
Sure.
So based just on the calorie theory, it's all about the calories. Well, if you cut out the fat, you cut out some calories. We'll talk about that when we get into myths. That was not true. And they also believe that fat clogs your arteries and causes your cholesterol to go up, therefore giving you a heart attack. Most of that has been completely debunked. And I can go through the research with you, and I can tell you how I came to, because I was a low-fat diet advocate. Let's be clear. I started my career in 1991 at Equinox Fitness Clubs. And I became the head of the Equinox, not the head, but the dean of the Equinox Fitness Training Institute, training trainers And I believed everything I had learned as a trainer. I believed in low fat diets. I believed in calorie counting. I believed that the harder you worked on that Stairmaster, the more weight would come off. And I just believed all of that. It's all about calories. And we, every one of us that were working in the field at that time, owe a massive apology to our clients, because what we believed was that if they did what we told them and they didn't lose weight, they were cheating.
Mm-hmm.
We never even imagined that our advice could have been boneheadedly wrong. And if you're familiar with Dr. Peter Attia, who is probably one of the greatest doctors in America, he wrote, in my opinion, the best book on anti-aging ever written. It was a New York Times bestseller for 6 months. Outlive. Peter Attia did. I first heard of him about 5, 6 years ago. He did a TED lecture, and in that TED lecture, he had tears in his eyes, and he apologized to the diabetic patients that he had believed were lying and cheating on their diets and were probably just, gluttons for food and couldn't control their appetites. And all of that was wrong. And it was a very moving talk. It's when I first became a fan of his. So I echo that apology.
Mm.
It's not all about calories. It is very much about hormones.
Mm.
Food has a hormonal effect. Food is a messenger. It
Mm-hmm.
sends messages to the cells. It sends messages to different systems in the body. Store
Mm-hmm.
more fat, insulin. Burn more fat, testosterone. I mean, all hormones have different roles, and they basically are running the show. Calories are just a measure. It's like saying how much does something weigh, but that something could be gold or it could be cornflakes. So the weight, number of calories, is only one little piece of data. The most important data is, what does this food do to your hormones? And one of the reasons that the low fat diet was such an abysmal error for most people trying to lose weight is they replaced the fat with carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's hard to explain why this was boneheadedly wrong without introducing a very important metabolic hormone called insulin. People have heard of insulin because they associate it with diabetics. Diabetics either have too much of it or too little of it, or it doesn't work right. Many diabetics are on insulin therapy. It's a long story, but here's what you got to know. Insulin is the fat storage hormone. Insulin, the body's response to food, is to produce insulin. The food you choose determines how much insulin you produce. So if you eat, insulin responds to sugar in the bloodstream. If you eat a lot of sugar, your insulin goes through the roof. If you
Right.
don't eat much sugar, it stays down. We
Sure.
eat a diet, especially when we're eating low fat diets and eating this junk food that they fostered on us, telling us, oh, but it doesn't have any fat. It was loaded with
Mm.
sugar. It was things like Snackwell cookies. It was processed food, and it drove our insulin levels through the roof. And of course, we couldn't lose weight.
Sure.
So
So,
the low fat diet was based on two incorrect principles. One is that calories are all that matter, and two is that fat is bad for you. Neither of those things are true. Calories do matter, but they are very far from the whole picture. And if you ignore the hormonal effect that the foods you are eating is producing, you're missing the whole picture.
so Dr. Bowden, just follow up. You would say replacing fat for carbs is not good. How about replacing fats for
It's not,
for proteins or anything is not? So you would say keep on eating the fats. How would you measure that, or is there a measurable index for that? And if it's not calories, what is it? The index
well, as
that
I
we would.
said, the major driver of weight, which is why most people come to nutritionists. Unfortunately, they don't always come because they want to get more vitality and more energy and be more present and all that. They usually, the pain point that brings people most of the time, 80, 90% of the time, to people like me, is I want to lose weight.
Sure.
So from the point of view of weight loss, it's very important to understand the effect of different kind of foods on insulin.
Okay.
So here's how it works. The food group that raises insulin absolutely overpoweringly the most of any of them is carbohydrate.
Okay.
Protein raises insulin a little.
Sure.
Guess what doesn't even move the needle on insulin? Fat.
Mhm.
So think of the wisdom, quote unquote, of advising people who are trying to lose weight to eat the most of the one macronutrient, carbohydrates, that is going to raise their fat storage metabolism the highest. It is just nuts. Now, if you ask how have my opinions changed on this a little, due to some really extraordinarily persistent research by one of the best thinkers in the field, Denise Minger, we have come to realize that low-fat diets can work. They're not always unsuccessful. They are difficult. The food doesn't taste very good without fat, but they can be successful if done right, and we never did them right. We defined a low-fat diet as less than 30% fat. When you want to see a low-fat diet work, it's got to be like 5% fat. It's like no fat. Now, when you do that, it works. Nobody can do it, but you can do it. At Cleveland Clinic, there's a very interesting dichotomy. They now have a functional medicine center. And two of the top doctors at the Cleveland Center, one of them is Mark Hyman, who is the head of the functional medicine department at Cleveland Clinic, and the other is Carol Esserson. Esserson recommends a zero-fat diet. Hyman recommends a high-fat diet. They
Okay.
both actually will work. Esserson's diet is zero fat. Yeah, it'll work. Now, is it
So,
necessary? I don't
so
think
to
so.
them, fat amount doesn't matter. Even if you're losing fat, it doesn't matter.
You could never say it doesn't matter at all. For example, I could eat nothing but fat all day long, which is
Sure.
barely going to move my insulin. But if I eat 10,000 calories of it, you better believe I'm going to gain weight. So we
Hmm.
can't say it doesn't matter. But for the same amount of food, if it's a high fat meal versus a low fat meal, chances are the high fat meal is going to have less of an effect on insulin. Now, can you put your thumb on the scale and just eat so many damn calories that of course it's yes, but let's be reasonable. And what I'm talking about is you got a 700 calorie meal there and it's all cornflakes, or you got a 700 calorie meal there and it's all steak. Dude, go with the steak.
Sure. Eat real food.
Yeah,
I got that. Let's move on to the next question, Dr. Bowden. There's a little bit of a hype about detox or liquid cleanses.
a lot of hype.
We often see people who are using these diets, they do feel drained, whether it's physically or emotionally. What's your take on those two diets, and how would you incorporate it in your daily plan?
I think that detoxification and immunity are kind of related in the sense that your body does both of those things just fine if there aren't things blocking it from doing what it's supposed to do. Your liver has the most sophisticated and brilliant detoxification system you can imagine a computer inventing. It's called the cytochrome P450 enzyme system, and it's in two phases. And every phase, every metabolic process, every biologic process is nutrient driven. Most of us do not get the right nutrients. Most of us overload our liver with all kinds of crap, with processed foods, with the stuff that unfortunately we're exposed to in the air and in the water supply, and sprays on the foods that we eat, and cigarette smoke, and medicines, unfortunately, even prescription ones, and recreational drugs. All of that burdens the liver with a a load that's like your email box is this high with stuff that you got to answer. And the liver's got this huge load. And on top of having a bigger toxic load than I think ever in history, because we were never exposed to 80,000 chemicals before. In addition, we're not even feeding it the nutrients it needs to perform its. So, and it's sort of similar with the immune system. People sell products all the time to boost immunity. You can't boost immunity. What you want to do is get your immune system working the way it's supposed to. What you want to do is get your detoxification program working the way it's supposed to. So forget all the products for detoxification. That's all marketing. This is what you're trying to do when you're trying to detox. It's like cleaning out your email box. If you want to answer all those letters, stop taking new incoming email for a day and deal with what you got. So if you're the liver, you're saying, stop adding to my load. Let me handle the stuff I got already, right?
Sure.
So what really detoxes very effectively is a very low calorie, very almost, even a fast. Not a water fast. I mean, plenty of water, and you need to take some nutrients because again, the liver needs those nutrients, but don't add to its burden. So a detox program really doesn't need special products. What you need is to give a lot of liver support with liver supporting foods and supplements, which can be very, very helpful for the liver. Alpha lipoic acid, milk thistle, pumpkin seed extract. All these things are wonderful for the liver. So you want to support the liver in its job, and you don't want to make that job harder by adding more processed food. You really don't need special products. Many
Gotcha.
people find that a juice fast or just
Mm.
making fresh juices or bone broth or something very easy to digest and light so that you're not starving all the time is a very good way to do a detox. You don't need expensive products.
Understood. Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. You talk about trust but verify. Trust and verification. When it comes to nutrition advice, those of us who are navigating through health information, what would you say would be some of the common mistakes or things that we should look out for? Give us some advice on that.
Well, this is a very hard question, Dr. Amir, and the reason for that is that we are subjected to almost indescribable amounts of marketing material.
Sure.
People hear about their supplements on Instagram now, and it's not just supplements. The entire Ozempic campaign was basically targeting TikTok. People are learning about Ozempic from TikTok. You think they're getting good information? So you should probably look at, people are going to kill me for saying this, and I'm going to, if the only place you ever heard of some magic colostrum or terrific collagen or some immune is on Instagram, you should probably have a little skepticism. So I think what we basically have here is an environment in which we are inundated with marketing material and marketing messages, and it's so insidious that they are meant to look like impartial information. I'll give you a great example. This is something everybody's encountered. You want to buy a dishwasher. You go online to see what's the best dishwasher, and you find a site that says the best dishwashers in the world.com. Well, that site is not an objective site. That was paid for by one of the dishwashing manufacturers who probably is rated number one in their list. And they put a bunch of other ones in there so it looks like it's a real official site, but it's not. The same thing is true with nutrition. I have seen people have brought to me ads for things like collagen or colostrum or some product or other. And I look at what the ingredients are, and they're not bad ingredients. They're about 10 times the price of what I get them for through a professional vitamin distributor that isn't marketing them on Instagram and isn't doing a $10 million ad campaign. But they're exact. I can get the same product for $20 that they're paying $100 for. So it's not that there's never good information on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. A lot of my friends are on Instagram and give great information out there, but it's mixed in with incredible marketing messages that are very confusing to consumers. Because on the one hand, you might have an expert like Dr. Jeffrey Bland or Dr. Mark Hyman or or you, and on the other hand, you got somebody on TikTok saying it's with terrific graphics and interesting visuals, and which product you're going to buy. So I think that's what people have to first really be suspicious of what they read online.
Okay. You mentioned in your book, Live Longer. You explored actually the science of longevity. So, someone who wants to make small but impactful changes to their daily routine, what are some of the most effective habits they can adopt for
Well,
longer, healthier life?
you will. I don't think you'll be surprised, but a lot of people are surprised by my answer to this. In 33 years of doing this work and looking at diets and looking at studies and reading the research and talking to clients, um, it is very clear to me that the best predictor of long life and happiness is not what you eat, and it's
Hmm.
not how you exercise.
Sure.
And I am not, this is what I'm about to tell you, folks, is not some kumbaya granola eating stuff. There is hard research on this. The blue zones is one,
Hmm.
and the other one is the happiness study at Harvard. 4 generations of people tested over the years and looking at health outcomes and trying to figure out what do they do different than the rest of us, and which ones are getting sick and which ones are living well and which ones are 85 and the happiest they've ever been, and what are the connections and what can we learn from these people. And this is a respected study. The current director, they've had 4 directors since the study started in 1936, and the fourth one just wrote a book about the happiness study. So this is all verifiable stuff. You can look it up. It's all in the research. Now let me tell you what it is. The single best predictor, folks, of long life and long health. Make friends and family your number one priority. Number two isn't even close, Dr. Amir. It's not even close. This is like in real estate, there's an old funny saying. They said the 3 most important things in real estate are location, location, and location. The 3 most important things in health: relationships, relationships. You mentioned stress earlier, I think. I and every other nutritionist and functional medicine person in the world got 8,000 questions during the pandemic. What should I take? What should I do? What am I going to do? You know what my first piece of advice was? Turn off Facebook. They were sitting there.
Oh,
They
good
went
for you.
out. My friends here in LA, they went to Costco. They bought up all this vitamin C. They're sitting there and they're watching this thing that is stressing them out of their minds. And guess what that stress is doing? It is eating up every drop of vitamin C. It is eating up every drop of pantothenic acid, vitamin
Interesting.
B5. It is sending hormones like cortisol and adrenaline through your body, which are literally, doing lots of destruction in the amounts that they have been elevated to because of the stress. Lowering stress is one of the most healing things you could do. And if you ask me, what could we really do? I don't know. Start with 5-minute breaks every day. Start with some deep breathing exercises. Take a walk around the block. Get some sun. Take a moment off and just breathe. These things, when I work with clients, they usually come to me because they're very distressed over their cholesterol test and their doctor's telling them to go on statins and they want another opinion, or they're something about their diet. And invariably, at the end of talking about these things, which are serious concerns, which we want to fix, I'm not saying they don't matter. They do matter. I'm saying this matters as much or more. And I ask them towards the end of every session, what's your family life like? And their faces light up and they tell you about their kids and they say, I've been in love with my husband or my lover or my whatever it is that their partner for these images, or if they don't have a partner, they go, oh, I have this great card group that I play with, and their faces light up and they talk about their tennis or they talk about their bridge game. And I say, listen to me. Every one of those things is a deposit into your health bank. If you think of your health as like a bank account, you make some withdrawals. You got some lousy tests. You have high cholesterol. You have bad blood sugar. We can work on all that. Those are all
Right.
withdrawals. But that stuff you're doing on the weekends with your family is a huge, big deposit. And I want people to appreciate how important that is. They think it's all about what they eat, all about what they exercise, all about what their genes are saying. All are important, but nothing's as important and because when you connect with your family and your friends or your social group or your social connections or the person who waits on you at the grocery store and you make a connect, every time you do that, your body goes into what's called parasympathetic mode. That's where healing takes place. That's where fat burning takes place. And guess what? That's where detoxification takes place. And guess where we live? We live in the sympathetic mode, which is fight or flight, and we're there about 23 hours out of 24 hours a day. So you want to get better, you want your life to improve, your serenity to go up a little bit, your anxiety to go down a little bit, you need to spend some more time in parasympathetic mode. And how do you get there? Connecting with people, meditating, deep breathing, relaxing, getting better sleep. These are
And
the
eating a good diet, of
of
course, right?
course, of
You
course. I
say
never
eat
mean to imply.
eat real food is
Yes,
is
exactly.
eat the real food than doing anything else. I think that's also so that's a good advice. Appreciate that. Stay in the parasympathetic. Don't fight and flight always, even though life is a fight and life is a flight at the end of the day. But you're saying enjoy your moments. It's not the diet. It's not the exercise. It's not everything. It's all of the other things you mentioned.
Yes,
Relationships. I think that's important, and keep your family and friends nearer to you,
number one.
and probably your foes as well. So all
The,
of them.
the great
Appreciate
philosopher,
that.
the philosopher Robert Greene says, look for all moments, AWE. Look for just moments in the day where you can go, wow,
Yeah,
this is incredible. Even if it's
it's
just,
definitely about the moments. Let me come back to the diet part a little bit and talk about emergencies with better food choices. We're always in a mode for fight and flight. We're on the run. We have a lot of things planned in our day. Time is less. Diet becomes a very low option along with sleep. What would you suggest? How do we prepare our diets and what should we do?
well, I'll tell you what I did. I've struggled with a few extra pounds for many, many years. I've just always, I'm lean now. I'm great body fat, great weight, but I've been as much as 25 pounds heavier than this. And I'm always kind of fighting. Like I'm one of those guys that you look at Baskin Robbins and you immediately gain weight before you even put the spoon in.
Yeah.
So the pandemic comes along and everybody gets crazy and the grocery stores are empty and there's like, what are you going to buy? What are you going to, and everybody's stocking up on toilet paper. It's wild madness. So I didn't want to go to the grocery store that much. I wound up, I don't want to say living on this food, but I will say that
Mhm.
it got me out of every emergency. I kept it in the car. I ate on the way to tennis. I would nibble on them all day long. I lived on nuts. You want to know what happened to my
Nuts.
weight?
Hmm.
I have never been. at that good a weight in my life, and I've kept it exactly within 4 pounds since the pandemic.
Nuts.
Nuts have been my go. I mean, that is the go-to if you're
Go to diet.
airport.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for that advice. We'll keep that in mind.
really good food. Macadamia nuts,
Okay. And
Brazil
all
nuts.
types.
Brazil nuts are loaded with selenium. One of
Just a
the
multiple of nuts and keep that as your
It's a good place to
food for
start.
emergency and don't.
Beef jerky is good. Good grass-fed beef jerky.
Okay.
Cheese, peanut butter, and celery. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of ways to. I travel all the time. I'm constantly like on the run in my schedule, and it's you got to have some go-tos that do damage control when you're on the road. Because when
Sure.
you're on the road, food choices that you might not make at home when you're become much more attractive. I'm very attracted to pizza when I'm in airports. So you want to be able to have some good basic stuff. That I mean, if all else fails, trail mix. If you go on a Southwest Airlines flight, everything that they give you is absolutely horrible. Pretzels and mini bits and all this, it's just absolute
Right.
processed food from a factory. So you're better off with actual trail mix. At least it's got nuts and fruit in it.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that. Let's move on to sort of like a little personal to more professional. Your journey through addiction to wellness has given you a perspective about food dependency, struggles with craving or food addiction. Tell us about the mindsets that one should develop and how can one overcome, especially when they are fasting or they are food deprived or they're restricting themselves from some specific food.
Well, I'd need to know more about the specific situation. Why are they restricting themselves from one particular food? Are they allergic? Do they have bad reaction to it? Do they get brain fog? And maybe they should restrict that food. I don't know. I can tell you that I believe that all addiction shares certain general similarities. There are certain similarities, whether you're addicted to gambling, pornography, carbohydrates, alcohol. There's a certain
Mhm.
craving in the brain. The pleasure pathways in the brain are kind of hijacked. So everybody's got to do the work of having some resources for when those temptations come up. That is why drug addicts and alcoholics go to 12-step meetings. They may be totally sober, but they're doing it because they know that there are going to be circumstances when they are going to waver from the value that they are committed to. So they need resources. Meetings are a resource. Phone numbers are a resource. People to talk to are a resource. Staying away from when my wife stopped smoking, she changed the route home from work because the way she drove home from work, always she would pass a gas station where she was
Thank you for that.
habituated to buying cigarettes that she wisely decided, let me change that so I don't face that temptation every day. And that's why they tell alcoholics to stay out of bars. So when I first stopped drinking in the 1980s, I didn't go near a bar and I didn't keep my alcoholic friends or my drug addict friends. Now my wife drinks a few times a week. We have alcohol in the house. We go to bars all the time, and it creates zero temptation for me. Zero. So what I think people, and I'm not being complacent about that. I'm just saying that it is so much something that I have decided I cannot live a healthy life with alcohol or drugs, and that is just something that I accept the way somebody who has a peanut allergy accepts it. The problem a lot of people have with food addiction is that there's so many messages in the society and the media universe that say, hey, this is healthy, this is corn fed, this is great, hey, healthy little kids on Cheerios and whatever else it is. And those messages are very difficult to process if someone like me is telling you, no, dude, those things are really bad. So they have all this other information that's telling them it's great. Well, it's like me seeing beer commercials where they say, oh, we're all, having beer and having, not for me. And some people may have to do that with sugar. And it's not easy because it's been experimentally shown that with rats, that the addiction to food, to sugar, is as great as the addiction or greater in terms of measured behavior in a maze with rats. They will go through more agony, more obstacles, and it will persist longer to get sugar than to get cocaine. So it's a big job. To what I always say to addicts, to fellow addicts, is that you can't you have to look at what the thing you're addicted to, what it is doing in your life for you, what need it is fulfilling, what in many cases, what are you medicating? What are you trying to stuff down and not feel? And I think it's important to not just take the addictive substance out, but to replace it with something that could bring you that same feeling. So, for example, if you're a kid is asking for a glass of water every night, he won't go to bed until he doesn't want the water. He wants the attention of the mother. So, really smart behaviorists will try to show him how to get that love and attention without necessarily having to demand the water at night.
Sure.
There was a young man in my circle who was completely addicted to marijuana, and we could have a long discussion. Is it addicted? Is it not? There's 10% of the people get addicted and get dependent, and they are the exact same people who should not be smoking pot. And he was one of them. And I realized he has nothing else in his life. He had
Mm.
no friends. He had no social connections. He stayed in his house all day, smoked pot, and watched TV, and went to work at a warehouse. And I realized you can't take the pot away from that kid. You've got to replace it and show him how to get some of that good feeling some other way. So I think that that's a big part of addiction, is understanding what role it fills in your life, looking a little more deeply, and understanding what you're actually trying to soothe or get rid of. It's not that hard to notice. If you notice every time you're having a difficult conversation with someone, you reach for a cigarette or you reach for some food mindlessly, you realize you're using that in some way to emotionally medicate. So you got to kind of do the work to find out what that is and to work on it. And breaking addictions is not easy. I've done it, and it's probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But let me tell you that at the end of that tunnel, if it's really something that is really harming you metabolically or psychologically or interfering with your physical or mental wellness, and you get it out of your life, the rewards of that will dwarf whatever discomfort you have to go through to get there. I say that as an ex-smoker. I mean, it was not fun to stop smoking, but ask me if I'd ever pick up a cigarette again. And the answer is very, very clear. I don't miss it one drop, but it took a while to get there. You just got to be committed to something bigger than the immediate pleasure of the substance.
Thank you for that clarification. And thank you, Dr. Bowden. Really appreciate.
I have a book that your audience, I'll bet you would like. I brought the Great Cholesterol Myth to show because I'm one of the ones I'm proudest of in it. But I think the book, The 150 Healthiest Foods on Earth, would be something that a lot of your viewers would like. It's kind of an encyclopedia of foods. It's been revised. There's a 10th anniversary edition out that's a bestseller. And you can read it one page at a time. You just open to the food you're interested in, and you'll read something about it, and it will tell you, what's in it, why it's good. I mean, every one of those foods was hand selected, and they're all good for you in different ways. And a lot of people it's a great Christmas gift, or gift for the holidays or anything else. I'm proud of that book.
Absolutely. And I think it's a very good time to share it as well. Thanksgiving is around the corner as well.